I'm sorry, you're not gonna like this, but endometriosis and PCOS are not the same thing. I used to think that too. Turns out they're not at all. Growing up, I heard a lot about PCOS, but not endometriosis. I didn't hear a word about endometriosis or knew what it was until I was diagnosed. And trust me, navigating this disease has been eye-opening. So let's break down the differences, as I know I'm not the only one that was confused, right? Okay, let's get into it. Growing up as a teen, I heard the acronym PCOS a few times. Now that I know more about both conditions, I realized that I understood the full context of what it meant back then. That it affected our periods, giving us irregular periods, and that it affected us by giving us a hormone imbalance. That's what I understood. It seemed to me that more people knew about what it was, or at least heard about it. But endometriosis? Nada. It was never mentioned to me until I was diagnosed with it in 2021. Despite how common, yet information lacking both conditions are, endometriosis often flies more under the radar. While both conditions affect the female reproductive system, there's still so much research left to be done so that we can understand both conditions. What's surprising to me is how much more information and awareness there is about PCOS in comparison to endometriosis, and how many people think they are the same thing. Okay, so let's get into it. What exactly is endometriosis? So, you know when you're having your period and the walls of your uterus lining starts to break down and that's what comes out as your period? Endometriosis is when these tissues from that wall not only breaks down and comes out as a period, but they break down and then they find themselves in other places of the body, like on the ovaries, in the womb itself, the fallopian tube, and then these tissues go even further in the body sometimes. They can go on your bowel, your bladder, even as far as your lungs. Now, these tissues that break down and attach themselves in various parts of your body can cause severe pain, heavy bleeding, and even infertility. Now, this is what grinds my gears about endometriosis. The exact cause of endometriosis is unknown. Diagnosis takes many years. For many people, often takes more than 10 years to be diagnosed because the symptoms are dismissed, misunderstood, or taken for something else. Now, on the other hand, what is PCOS? Well, firstly, it's an acronym. It stands for Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. PCOS is a hormonal disorder where the body produces an excessive amount of the male hormone androgens, and this causes hormonal imbalance. Also causes irregular periods, ovarian cysts, weight gain, acne, hormonal imbalance, as I said before, and research has shown that also PCOS can affect infertility. Here are some key differences between endometriosis and PCOS. First, let's start with the causes and the symptoms. Endometriosis involves tissue growth outside of the uterus. The hallmark for endometriosis is pelvic pain, and it has a very high risk of infertility. PCOS is a hormonal imbalance which often presents itself with irregular periods, hormone imbalance, weight changes, etc. The next key difference is the diagnosis. For endometriosis, it requires a mixture of tests to be able to diagnose it properly. For example, you need to do diagnostic imaging like MRI, ultrasound, CT scan. You also need to do surgical testing like doing an endoscopy. You also need to do cellular analysis tests, for example, doing a pap smear and doing blood tests. This mixture of testing is what truly defines and gives you the correct diagnosis of endometriosis. You can get a PCO diagnosis by also doing things similar. So for PCOS, you do need a diagnostic test, which is an ultrasound, and you also need a cellular analysis test, which is blood tests. Those two things can determine whether or not you have PCOS. The third key difference is treatment. Now, there are some things that are similar for both PCOS and endometriosis, such as having a healthy or nutritious change in your diet, exercise. So basically, lifestyle changes are the same right across the board for endometriosis and PCOS. Both of them can be managed by medication. Oftentimes, it is hormonal medication. For endometriosis, because we have an excess of estrogen, the medication is going to reduce that. For PCOS, because you have an excess of androgen, the medication will reduce that. But both conditions can be managed by hormonal medication. For endometriosis though, it is highly recommended to manage it. You need surgery to remove the lesions from wherever they are, especially if you are in stage 2 or above. For PCOS, you can do surgery if the cysts are dangerous and your doctors would determine that. But from my research as well as my experience with friends and family, the medication often reduces or eliminates the cysts. Now, both conditions are very serious and can severely impact a good quality of life for the women who have them. However, they are not the same. More awareness, more research, and more conversations without being judged are needed on these two topics so that the people who have them and their family members and friends can support them, get information, as well as the people who have them can have a good quality of life with support. If you are struggling with either PCOS or endometriosis, reach out to your healthcare providers, ask the relevant questions, get tested if you must, spread the word, tell your family members and friends about what you learned.
I know it's easier said than done, but
don't be shy to do it. Let's keep the conversation going. That's the only way the information can get to everyone and everyone can have a good understanding of what these conditions are, how the people who are undergoing these conditions are being affected, and how they as family members and friends can support them.
Thanks again for watching. Like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.